$1.70, $3. That was all Elias Mercer had left when the coach from Dodge City came rattling over the flats. He had not spent it on seed. He had not spent it on cattle. He had sent it to a marriage bureau in Denver, along with a letter written in a hand that shook by the end. Wanted wife for claim household. Must be willing to live rough. Must understand farm work. The reply had been only 9 words. Chinese woman, 20 years, quiet, domestic. Arrives Friday. For 3 days, Elias told himself quiet meant steady. Domestic meant useful. 20 meant old enough to choose a hard life and survive it. Then the coach stopped in front of the Crooked Bend Mercantile, and the door opened. A small woman stepped down with a cracked red tea tin held against her ribs. That was the first thing Elias noticed. Not a trunk, not a carpet bag, not a bedroll, a tea tin. Her dress was brown cotton. Sun, faded at the elbows and too loose at the shoulders. Her black hair was pinned tight at the back of her head. The plains wind pushed dust across her boots, and she did not flinch. She looked too thin for the country, too still for the noise around her, too young for the bargain he had made. Elias felt the shame of it rise hot in his throat. He had needed a wife on paper because the land office expected a settled household before it would issue the final patent on his claim. He had needed another pair of hands because Knife Creek, the only water running near his sod house, was shrinking every week. And he had needed proof he was not a man already beaten. What had arrived looked like none of those things. The driver tossed down one mail sack and spat into the dust. "Mercer," he called, "this one's yours." Every man in front of the mercantile turned. The woman lifted her eyes to Elias. There was no softness in them, no pleading, no fear, only a patient kind of watching, as if she had learned long ago that rooms were safer when you understood them before you entered them. "You are Elias Mercer?" she asked. Her English was careful, clipped at the edges. "Yes," he said, "I am Lien Qiao." He nodded, though the name came to him like something he had been trusted with and did not know how to hold. Behind him, someone laughed under his breath. Elias pretended not to hear it. He lifted her small bundle from the coach step. It weighed almost nothing. She did not offer him the tea tin. She kept that herself. The ride to his place took more than an hour. The horse moved slowly through rutted ground where grass had burned yellow by late July. The sky looked empty enough to swallow a man whole. Elias pointed with the reins. "North line is those cottonwoods. South line is the ridge. Houses there." Lien followed his gesture, but her gaze did not stop on the house. It stopped on the creek, or what was left of it. Knife Creek should have been a ribbon of moving water cutting silver through the land. Instead, it crawled between stones in a string of shallow pools. Elias saw her look at it. "That creek kept my father alive out here," he said, "before Gideon Rusk put his men upstream." The name hung between them. Rusk owned the big spread west of Crooked Bend. He owned most of the cattle. He owned the storekeeper's debt, the sheriff's horse, and half the courage in the county by keeping it in his pocket. Lien said nothing. At the sod house, Elias carried her bundle inside. The place was clean because there was so little in it: a stove, a narrow bed, a table with one cracked leg, 2 chairs, 3 shelves, a wash basin, and a Bible that had belonged to his mother. He opened the pantry and hated himself for it. A sack of meal, a little flour, dried beans, a slab of tough beef wrapped in cloth, a few onions going soft, coffee stretched with roasted chicory. He had brought a woman across half the country to live on scraps and fear. Lien looked at the shelves for a long moment. Then she touched the red tea tin with 2 fingers. "I can cook," she said. Elias let out a breath that almost became a laugh, except there was no humor in it. "Most folks can cook out here. The trick is having anything worth putting in the pot." She looked at him then, and for the first time he felt not judged exactly, but measured, as if she was not asking whether the pantry was poor. She was asking whether he was. The answer arrived the next afternoon in the shape of 3 riders coming hard over the ridge. Gideon Rusk rode in front. He was a broad man with a pearl-handled revolver, a silver watch chain, and the relaxed cruelty of someone who had never had to move aside for anybody. Even his horse looked expensive. Elias stepped into the yard before the riders reached the house. Rusk smiled. "Mercer heard the stage brought you company." His eyes shifted past Elias to the doorway, where Lien stood in her brown dress with her hands folded. "Well," Rusk said, drawing the word out, "ain't that a delicate solution to a government problem?" Elias felt his fingers curl. "She is my wife. Course she is." Rusk's smile widened. "And I'm a Sunday preacher." One of the riders laughed. Rusk swung down from the saddle and brushed dust from his sleeve, like he was standing in a parlor. "I'm having a patent supper tomorrow evening. Land Agent Pike is coming through from Hayes with 2 clerks. Thought I'd gather the valley and show him what real improvement looks like." Elias understood at once. Nathaniel Pike was the federal land agent who could delay a patent, recommend a claim for approval, or decide that a struggling homesteader had failed to improve the land enough to keep it. Rusk wanted Pike at his table. Rusk wanted the valley watching. Rusk wanted Elias to appear with a starving farm, a foreign wife, and a dry creek, so the government man would see weakness before he ever saw the truth. "Come along," Rusk said. "Bring your bride. I'm sure the agent will want to meet the new household." The invitation was not an invitation. It was a rope. Elias knew what would happen if he refused. Rusk would call him bitter, unstable, unneighborly. If he went, he would sit under lantern light while men praised Rusk's barns, Rusk's wells, Rusk's cattle, and Rusk's right to every drop of water that happened to pass his fences first. He looked at the ridge where Knife Creek should have been running strong. "We'll be there," Elias said. Rusk clapped him on the shoulder. The weight of that hand felt like ownership. When the riders left, Lien remained in the doorway. On the table behind her sat the red tea tin. For the first time, Elias wondered what was inside it. That night he did not sleep. The sod walls held the day's heat, and the dark smelled of dust, old smoke, and worry. Elias lay awake listening to the creek that was too far away and too weak to hear. Near midnight, a faint scraping sound came from the stove. He sat up. Lien was kneeling in the glow of a low flame. The red tea tin lay open beside her. Inside were not tea leaves. There were folded paper packets, a narrow bone, handled knife, dried orange peel, small black beans hard as shot, star-shaped spice, and a scrap of oilcloth covered in neat Chinese characters. Lien was grinding something in a cup with the handle of a spoon, slow, precise, certain, not like a woman trying to make do, like a craftsman preparing a tool. "What is all that?" Elias asked quietly. Lien did not startle. "My father's box," she said. Elias came closer. She lifted one of the packets to her nose, breathed it in, and set it aside. "He cooked for railroad bosses, Sacramento first, then Denver. Men who paid for silver forks and still complained the beef was dull. Elias stared at the little tin. He had imagined a desperate woman sent west because she had nowhere else to go. He had not imagined a daughter raised behind kitchen doors where rich men revealed what pleased them, what bored them, what made them feel powerful, and what made them listen. Lien reached for the slab of beef from the pantry. It was the kind of meat most men boiled until it surrendered nothing but salt. She pressed her thumb into it. "Bad cut," she said. "I know. Good for patient fire." Elias swallowed. "You don't understand what tomorrow is." "I understand men at tables," she said. He almost answered sharply. But something in her voice stopped him, so he told her. He told her about Rusk's ditch hidden above the bend. He told her how the creek had fallen by half after Rusk's men dug through public grazing land without a permit. He told her how 3 families had already sold out and left. He told her how the land office wanted proof of improvement, and he could not improve ground that was being dried on purpose. He told her how his father had died believing the claim would become a farm, not a patch of dirt bought cheaply by a cattle king. When he finished, the stove flame snapped in the silence. Lien folded the oilcloth carefully. "My father said powerful men eat 2 meals," she said. "The one on the plate, and the one everyone watches them eat." Elias looked at her. She tapped the beef. "Tomorrow he wants them to watch you starve." Then she tapped the red tea tin. "We make them watch him lose his appetite." It was the first impossible hope Elias had felt in months. And because he had nothing safer to believe in, he believed it. By noon the next day, the house smelled unlike anything that had ever lived inside its walls. Lien worked without hurry. She trimmed the hard beef into thin strips and beat them with the back of the knife until the fibers loosened. She soaked dried black beans and crushed them with garlic and salt. She shaved orange peel so fine it looked like curled gold. She browned onions in beef fat, then added a dark paste that hissed when it touched the pan. The smell rose deep and sharp. Sweet smoke, salt, bitter citrus, meat turning soft under command. Elias stood useless by the door. Once Lien looked at him and handed him a bucket. Water. He almost laughed at the cruelty of the word. The bucket came back half full from Knife Creek, brown at the bottom, thin at the top. Lien let the mud settle. Then she poured the clearer water gently into the pot. "Even poor water can carry flavor," she said. That line stayed with him. Near evening, Elias hitched the wagon. Lien wrapped the iron pot in a quilt and placed the red tea tin beneath the seat. The road to Rusk's ranch was crowded. Every farmer who had been frightened into silence was going. Every shopkeeper who owed Rusk money. Every hand who wanted to be seen laughing at the right jokes. Rusk's house stood on a rise like a fort made for supper. Fresh paint, glass windows, a porch wide enough for a dance. Behind it, his cattle filled the pens like moving wealth. Lanterns hung from poles. Fiddlers tuned near the barn. Long tables sagged with food. There were platters of beef, pork, beans, biscuits, pies, pickles, and whiskey set out like an argument. No poor man could answer. When Elias lifted Lien's pot from the wagon, 2 ranch hands saw it and grinned. "Mercer brought charity to the rich," one said. Rusk heard and laughed. "Put it anywhere," he called, "long as it don't frighten the guests." Lien walked past the kitchen door. She did not ask permission. She placed the pot in the middle of a long table, between a roast ham glazed with sugar and a tower of biscuits white as bone. The men closest to her went quiet. She took off the quilt, then the lid. Steam rolled upward, carrying a smell that moved through the yard faster than a rumor. Conversation broke in pieces. A fiddle missed a note. A clerk near the porch turned his head. Nathaniel Pike, the land agent, stood beside Rusk with a glass in his hand. He was a narrow man in a city coat gone dusty from travel, with tired eyes, and the look of someone who had eaten too many bad meals in too many proud houses. He stopped speaking. "What is that?" Pike asked. Rusk waved a hand. "Something Mercer's wife dragged in?" But Pike was already walking. The guests made room. Lien stood beside the pot with her hands folded. Her face showed nothing, not fear, not pride, not invitation. The dish inside was not a stew, not exactly. The beef lay in a glossy dark sauce with onions, dried chilies, orange peel, and beans that had melted into richness. It looked almost black in the lantern light, but when the spoon moved through it, the sauce shone red, brown underneath. Pike leaned over the pot. His expression changed before he tasted it. Memory reached him first. "Black bean and orange," he said softly. "I had something like this once in Sacramento." Lien looked at him. "My father cooked there," she said. Pike took a spoonful. The yard held still. He tasted. His eyes closed for one long second. Nobody breathed. Then Pike laughed. Not politely. Not because anyone expected him to. He laughed like a man who had been ambushed by pleasure. "Mr. Rusk," he said, turning back with the spoon still in his hand, "why have you been hiding the best cook in this territory at another man's claim?" The line landed harder than a slap. Rusk's smile stiffened. The clerks came next, then the storekeeper, then the sheriff, then ranch hands pretending they had only wandered close by accident. Within minutes, people were lining up for Lien's pot, while Rusk's shining platters sat cooling in their own grease. Elias watched the impossible happen. The room Rusk had built around himself began to lean away from him. Not all at once, not loudly, but unmistakably. Men who had lowered their voices near Rusk now spoke over him. Women asked Lien what she had used. Pike asked for another serving. Someone said Mercer's place must not be as dead as people claimed if food like that could come from it. That was the first crack. The second came when Rusk tried to take control back. "Fine trick," he said, loud enough for the table, "but a pot of beef won't put water in a ditch." Elias felt the old fear move through him. Lien turned her head. For the first time since she had arrived, she spoke to Rusk directly. "No," she said, "but it can bring the right man to ask why the ditch is dry." The yard went quiet again. Pike lowered his spoon. "What ditch?" he asked. Rusk's eyes cut to Elias. There it was. The opening, not mercy, not charity. A door Lien had forced open with skill, timing, and an entire yard of witnesses. Elias stepped into it. He told Pike about Knife Creek. He told him about the new cut above the bend. He told him about the public strip where no private ditch had been filed. He told him about the families who sold out after their wells weakened. He told it plainly, without pleading, because the man listening had already seen something Rusk could not explain away. A household was not dead. A claim was not abandoned. A wife was not decoration. And poverty did not mean fraud. Pike's face hardened as Elias spoke. Rusk tried to interrupt. Pike lifted one hand without looking at him. That small gesture changed the air. The cattle king stopped talking. The next morning Pike rode to Knife Creek with his clerks. Elias, Lien, and half the valley following at a distance they pretended was accidental. They found the cut less than a mile above the Mercer claim. Fresh shovel scars marked the bank. A rough gate of boards and iron straps pushed water west toward Rusk's hay ground. The ditch was narrow enough to hide from the main road and deep enough to steal a farm's future. One clerk checked the survey book, the other paced the distance from the cottonwoods. Pike crouched at the gate and touched the wet boards. "This structure is not listed," he said. Rusk, who had ridden up late and angry, forced a smile. "Temporary cattle measure." Pike stood. "On unpatented land?" Rusk's jaw shifted. "And across a public watercourse?" No one spoke. Pike looked toward Elias, then toward Lien, who stood at the bank with her brown skirt moving in the wind. The creek ran weakly around her boots. "Mr. Mercer," Pike said, "your final patent review will be held until this diversion is removed and properly reported. Your improvements will be evaluated with access to the watercourse restored." Elias did not understand every legal word. He understood enough. Rusk had not won, not that day, not in front of everyone, by autumn. The order came back from Hayes with a federal seal at the bottom. Rusk was required to remove the gate and fill the illegal cut. 2 other claims were reinstated for review after Pike's report. Knife Creek was not powerful, but it ran again. And in dry country, running was a miracle. Water returned first to the cottonwoods, then to the low garden patch Elias had thought he would never plant, then to the trough, then to the house itself, in ways no survey could measure. Lien began cooking twice a month at the freight office when stage passengers came through, then for a church supper, then for a cattle sale where even men from Rusk's outfit stood in line and paid cash without meeting her eyes. With that money, Elias bought seed wheat, 2 hens, and a milk cow with 1 bad horn and a generous udder. The pantry changed slowly. Meal sacks stopped leaning empty against the wall. Beans filled a jar. Coffee became coffee again. The roof stopped leaking above the stove. The red tea tin moved from beneath Lien's bed to the kitchen shelf. Not hidden, not displayed. Ready. One evening, after the first frost silvered the grass, Elias came in from mending fence and found Lien at the stove. She was making supper from beans, a little beef, onions, and bread left from morning. Nothing grand, nothing meant to impress a federal agent or silence a cattle king. Still, the room smelled alive. Elias washed his hands in the basin and sat at the table. For a while he watched her work. He thought of the coach door opening, the brown dress, the tea tin, the shame he had felt because he believed $73 had bought him a legal answer and a pair of hands. He had been wrong in every possible way. He had sent away for a wife because the government wanted a household. What arrived was a strategist with a cook's knife, a woman who understood that power could be moved without shouting, a partner who had taken the one battlefield Rusk did not respect and won it before he knew he was fighting. Lien placed a bowl in front of him. Elias looked across the table at her. "Your father taught you well," he said. She sat down opposite him. "He taught me food is not small," she answered. "Only hungry men think that after they are full." Outside, Knife Creek moved through the dark with a sound so steady it seemed impossible it had ever gone missing. Elias picked up his spoon. The valley would remember Rusk's barns, his cattle, his silver watch chain, and the day the federal order stripped the boards from his illegal gate. But Elias would remember something else. The night a woman everyone underestimated opened a little red tin, turned poor beef into proof, and changed the future of a claim nobody thought was worth saving.